Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave with Evil Eye Games. Today we're going to continue on with the sixth video in our series on creating a third-person cover shooter. First thing I would like to do is address a couple of issues that I noticed after the end of the previous video, in specific dealing with the cover sprinting into cover and as well as getting out of cover with using the directional keys as opposed to the cover button. So if we hit play and I move my character, I'm going to sprint into cover here and use the cover button. And if I exit cover, he starts doing that sprinting animation and stops because the is sprinting variable is never getting flicked off when he enters cover. And the other issue I noticed is if we take cover and if we rotate our camera around and I use the directional buttons to exit cover, he flips around after playing the animation to stand up. Whereas if I'm in cover and I hit the cover button, he flips around prior to playing the animation to stand up. Reason being is when we hit the button, it is triggering that take cover event in our player character. And as part of that, it sets the camera rotation yaw, or whether or not the camera is using the player rotation. Whereas when the animation notify that we're using right now, it does not use that. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our player character. And the one thing we notice about our take cover event here is we're using the set is taking cover, the not operator, and the user or use control rotation yaw repetitively. And anytime you see something happening over and over again, you're going to want to put it into a function or a macro. It's going to simplify your code. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our set is taking cover function. And right now we just have this is taking cover function setting the is taking cover variable. And what we're doing out here is we're setting is taking cover, setting the use controller rotation to the not, and then in the event that is taking cover is true, we're setting the actor rotation. So I'm going to grab this right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy it, and I'm going to paste it into our set is taking cover function. So I'm going to get rid of this setup here, and I'm going to drag this grouping up, and we're just going to plug these in. Now the set actor rotation here only gets fired when is taking cover is true. So I'm going to drag this off to the side here, and I'm going to get is taking cover, and I'm going to add in a branch, and we're going to plug that in the middle. So we want if is taking cover is true to perform the set actor rotation. So I'm going to go plug the true pin into our set actor rotation, and I'll drag it over to make it a little bit more neat. And what this function now does is everything that our cover event does on the other side. So what we can essentially do at this point is replace everything out in our player character with this set is taking cover function. So if we go back into the event graph here, we have all three of these right here. We can go ahead and get rid of these, and then we can drag out our set is taking cover function. So in the event that we're taking cover, we want this to be false. In the event that we are taking cover, or we are not taking cover, cover is available and the cover angle is good. I'm going to copy and paste this set is taking cover function. In this case, we want is taking cover to be true, and in the case that it's false, we flop back to our default of is taking cover is false. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save this. The other situation where we use this, and this function will be useful, is up above in our cover events, where it unsets us taking cover. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add this function in place of what we have up here because it's essentially the same thing repeated over and over again. And we're going to connect our false up to that. And we're going to go ahead and compile and save. And we'll go ahead and hit play. So if I go ahead and hit take cover, and we try to move out of cover, he does his rotation prior to standing up. Same thing, if we hit the cover button, does the exact same thing. So this function will essentially get rid of repeated code in our event graph that's just being the same thing placed over and over again. So I'm just going to neaten this up a little bit. And the other issue that we have is the sprint. And based on the way our AnimBP works, we're going to go ahead and open that up, and we're going to look at our state machine again. If we are sprinting and we want to take cover, we're going to do it when take cover is true. So what we want to do here is when we take cover, we want to unset is sprinting. And we want to do that after we set is taking cover to true. Otherwise, if is sprinting is set to false first, our character is going to go through the stop animation, go to the rifle walk, and then go into take cover. And I want it to be an instantaneous from sprinting right into getting into cover. So in our set is taking cover function, we're going to go ahead and add one more thing in. Now, in the event of any of these events being fired, we just want to flat out set is sprinting to false, no matter what. So right after is taking cover is set, I'm going to go ahead and set is sprinting to false. Now, the sprinting variable is stored within our player controller. So we're going to have to get a reference to our player controller. And very quickly, I'm going to go back to our event graph. And I'm going to right click and add in the event begin play. And seeing as the controller is something we can possibly use over and over again, we're going to go ahead and right click and get player controller. And then we are going to cast it to our 3P player controller. And then I'm going to take the 3P player controller cast, and I'm going to go ahead and promote that to a variable, and we'll just call it player controller. So now we have a reference to our player controller. So we can go back into our set is taking cover. I'm going to get our player controller reference. And then we're going to set is sprinting and use the function. And we're going to plug that into our execution chain here. And then I'll just go ahead and neaten this up a little bit. Alright, so that should complete the changes we need to make. I'll go ahead and compile and save, and let's test it out. So I'll go ahead and hit play. If we sprint into cover, and hit the cover button to take cover, I'm going to go ahead and use the movement key to move out of cover, and he doesn't do a stop sprinting animation any longer. So we've addressed the two main issues with sprinting into cover and sprinting after we get out of cover, as well as when our character rotates when using the movement keys to get out of cover. The main topic I want to address with this video is aiming out of cover. Now, our character has the ability to move into cover. He can move around in cover and then exit out of cover. But this is a shooter game after all. He's going to have the ability to pop his head out and shoot at the enemy, and that's what we're going to take care of next. So, first of all, we're going to have to add the input to aim. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings. We're going to go to Input. And we're going to add a new action mapping. And I'm going to call this action mapping aim button. And I'm going to make this button the mouse right button. So we can go ahead and close out of the project settings. Next, we're going to go into our player controller. And we're going to search for that new aim button. So I'm going to right click. And I'm going to search for aim button. And the way I want this to work is that when the player presses down the mouse button, the character will aim. And when they let go of the mouse button, he will return to cover and stop aiming. So we're going to go ahead and create a new variable. It's going to be a Boolean, and we're going to call it is aiming. And we're going to go ahead and set this variable. And we're going to need another copy of it as well. So one will go from pressed to set is aiming, and we're going to have it when it's pressed, set is aiming to true. And from released, we're going to go to the other set is aiming, and we're going to leave it empty so that it is false. I'm going to go ahead and put a comment box around it. Call it aim button. And that's all we're going to have to do in the controller. So we'll compile and save. And everything else is going to have to be done in the AnimBP. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the AnimBP. And the first thing we're going to do is going to go to the event graph. And we're going to have to get that variable is aiming. So from our 3P player controller, I'm going to drag off the cast. And we're going to search for get is aiming. And I'm going to go ahead and promote this to a variable. And we'll call the variable is aiming. And we'll connect it up. And I'll just hit compile and save real fast. And then we'll go into our state machine. And we're going to have to put in some animations in order to make our cover pop up out of cover. So in the asset browser here, I'm going to search for cover L to aim U. And this is the animation for him standing up and aiming from that cover left position. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag that out. And I'm going to call this cover left to aim left. The next animation we're going to need is our actual aiming animation. So I'm going to search for aim U. And we have this animation right here, the cover low aim U. I'm going to go ahead and drag that out. And I'm going to call this aim left. And then we're going to need an animation to return to our cover left. We want to search for aim U to cover L. So there's a cover low animation, aim U to cover L. We're going to drag that out. And I'm going to call this aim left to cover left. So for these animations, I'm just going to rearrange them a little bit here. And from cover left, we're going to go to cover left to aim left. From cover left to aim left to aim left. From aim left to aim left to cover left. And then from aim left to cover left, back down to cover left. These are getting a little cramped in here, so we'll just space it out a little bit. And then we're going to have to do the same thing with our cover right aim animations. So we're going to go ahead and search for cover R to aim U. We'll drag that out. And I'm going to call this one cover right to aim right. We're going to search for aim U, and we're going to select the cover low aim U animation, and I'm going to call this one aim right. And we're going to search for aim U to cover R. So there's the cover low aim U to cover R animation. I'm going to drag that one out. And I'm going to call that one aim right to cover right. And then we're going to follow the same exact pattern. So cover right is going to go to cover right to aim right. Cover right to aim right is going to travel to aim right. Aim right is going to travel to aim right to cover right. And aim right to cover right is going to go back down to cover right. So we have all of our animations in place. Now we need to make transition rules to travel between these animations. So I'm just going to follow them in the order of their loop. So from cover left to aim left, this transition rule, we're going to go and get our is aiming variable, and we're going to plug that directly in. So whenever we're aiming, we want to make the transition to aim left. The cover left to aim left is a one-time animation. So in this transition rule, we're going to put in a ratio, and we're going to get our time remaining. We're going to check to see if it is less than 0.4. And we're going to plug that into our results. And then from aim left to cover left, the transition rule is going to be when we're not aiming. So we're going to get our aiming. We're going to perform a not operator on it. And we're going to connect that to our results. We're going to go back. And then for the final transition from aim left to cover left, we're going to search for ratio, get our time remaining. We're going to check to see if it's less than 0.4. And we'll plug that into our result. And then the transition rules for aim right are going to be identical. So we'll get is aiming and plug that in for our cover right to aim right. For the cover right to aim right, we're going to get our ratio, select time remaining, see if it's less than a value of 0.4, and plug that into our result. Then for aim right to cover right, we're going to get our is aiming, perform a not operator, and plug that into our result. And finally, for aim right to cover right, we're going to search for ratio, get time remaining, and check to see if it's less than a value of 0.4 again. And we're going to plug that into our result. So at this point, we have all our transitions filled in. If we compile and save, and hit play, if I go into cover and I hit the right mouse button, our guy pops up and he is aiming. Now he's not following where we're looking because he doesn't have an aim offset attached to this animation. So we're going to have to go ahead and add that. So in our anim graph here, for aim left, we're going to go ahead and search in our asset browser for the rifle underscore aim offset. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that aim offset in here. and it needs the player aim yaw, so I'll get that variable, and the player aim pitch, and I'll go ahead and plug these into our aim offset, and then connect our animation to our aim offset into the final animation pose. And we're going to need to do the same thing for our aim right. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, open up our aim right, and paste our aim offset into place and connect it up. And we'll go ahead and compile and save. And if we hit play once again, we can move our character into cover. And if we aim, he now tracks around with us in his forward 180-degree arc. But he will not track behind him because the aim offset only covers the front 180 degrees. I'm going to cover in a later video how to address what happens when you look behind him, but for now this will do. The next thing I want to add in is moving left and right while he's in cover and him clinging to that cover. So I'm going to go ahead and close that out. So from our aim left here, we're going to have to go into our asset browser, and I'm going to search for strafe left. And there's the rifle _ strafe left loop. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this out, and I'm going to call this aim left, move left. And I'm going to drag a second one out for the aim right. And I'm going to call this one aim right, move right. Or correction, I'm going to name it aim right, move left. Okay. And then I'm going to, in our asset browser down here, search for strafe right, and I'm going to grab the rifle strafe right loop, and I'm going to call this one aim left, move right, and then I'm going to drag a second one out for aim right. We'll call it aim right, move right. So we have our animations in place to move left and move right. Now we're going to have to connect transition rules to them. So for the aim left side, I'm going to drag from aim left to aim left, move left, and a transition back. I'm going to do the same thing for aim left, move right, so that there is a transition from aim left to aim left, move right, and back. And then over on our aim right side, I'm going to do the same exact thing, where there will be a transition from aim right to each one of these animations and a transition back. So now we're going to have to handle the transitions for what these do, and they are going to be identical to walking left and walking right from our cover positions. So from cover left to cover walk left, if we open up that transition, we check to see if there's no end of cover left and if move right is less than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this. And in our aim left, move left transition here, from aim left to aim left, move left, I'm going to double click on that transition, and I'm going to paste this check that we performed earlier into the result. And the same rule is going to be true for the aim right, move left. So the transition from aim right to aim right, move left, I'm going to go ahead and paste that same transition rule in place, and we'll connect it up. Now the return from the move left to the aim left or right is going to be the same rule once again. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on cover walk left to cover left, and we have the check to see if the end of cover left or move right is greater than or equal to 0. I'm going to go ahead and copy that transition rule. And from aim left, move left to aim left, I'm going to open up that transition rule, paste it in place. And then I'm going to do the same thing over at aim right, move left to aim right. And then we're going to have to deal with the moving right motions. The moving right motions are going to be the same exact transition rules as between cover right and cover walk right. So from cover right to cover walk right, we check to see if end of cover is false and if move right is greater than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this transition. And once again, I'm going to paste it from aim left to aim left, move right. And from aim right to aim right, move right. And the transition back from the right movement is going to be the same as from cover walk right to cover right. So I open up that transition, and here we check to see if end of cover right or move right is less than or equal to 0. So I'll go ahead and copy that. And for the transition rule from move left or aim left, move right to aim left, I will go ahead and paste that in. And the same thing from aim right, move right to aim right. Now we're going to want the ability to aim as well. So in our aim left here, we had our aim offset. To make things quicker, I'm just going to copy the aim offset and the variables. And then we're going to move into aim left, move left. I'm going to go ahead and paste that in place. And then in aim left, move right, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to paste that aim offset into place. And then our moving animations on the other side, the aim right, move left, and the aim right, move right. So at this point, all 4 of our new aiming animations for moving left and moving right are going to have aim offsets, and they're going to have transition rules between them. So if we go ahead and compile and save, and we'll go ahead and hit play. If we move our character into cover, and we aim, and move left and move right, he's going to cling to cover there, and he is going to follow where we're aiming. Now, the last thing I want the player to be able to do is move out of cover when he's aiming. So if he hits the motion key away from cover, or if he hits the cover button, I want it to transition back to our rifle walk state. So all 3 of these aiming animations here are going to need a way to transition back to our rifle walk, as well as the aim right animations over here. So in order to do this, this presents a little bit of a situation where there's no transition animation. Those aiming animations are the same thing as the idle animation from the rifle walk blend space. So what we're going to need to do is provide a transition with a animation in it that is going to trigger us to get out of cover. Now, in the case of the cover left and the cover walk left there's this cover left to idle animation that we had in place, and there's an animation notify in there that sets our character to not be in cover anymore. Since these animations are the same as the rifle walk, we're going to have to put in a sort of dummy animation that's going to trigger a notify when we move out of cover, so that we can make the transition if we don't use the cover button. All right, so in the asset browser, I'm going to search for rifle idle, and then I'll bring up our rifle idle animation sequence, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to find in content browser. So that'll take us to the animation in our content browser, and I'm going to right click on this animation, and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to call this animation aim. We'll call it a cover aim to idle. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this new animation, and at the very beginning we're going to have to add a notify, and that notify is going to be stop taking cover, and we're going to want to make sure this is at the very beginning of the notify track, and we're only going to need about 10 frames of this animation. So I'm going to pause this animation here, and we're going to go to the front, and I'm going to use the next button here to walk it into the 10th frame. And where this red tracker is on the play bar at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and right click, and I'm going to go ahead and remove frame 10 to frame 433. So that's going to leave us with 10 frames from frame 0 to frame 9. And I'm going to go ahead and save this animation. Now this animation is just going to be a dummy animation that sits in between our aiming animations to our regular movement blend space. So we're going to go back to our graph, and we're going to search for that animation in our asset browser. So it is going to be aim to, there we go, cover aim to idle, and I'm going to go ahead and drag this out to the left here, and I'm going to call this animation aim left to rifle walk, and I'm going to drag it out again to the right hand side here, and we'll call it aim right to rifle walk. So from this animation, we're going to need to connect all of our aiming animations here. So I'm going to drag down from aim left, move left. I'm going to drag down from aim left, move right, and then from aim left. So all three of these aim animations are going to travel into this aim left to rifle walk. I'm going to do the same thing with the aim right animations. I'm going to drag them all down to this aim right to rifle walk. And the transition that's coming down here is going to be the same transition rule that we used to get out of cover in the first place. So I'm going to open up the transition from cover left to idle here. If we double click on this, I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And this is where we check our move forward to see if it's less than or equal to negative 0.75, or if is taking cover as false. And I'm going to go ahead and in each one of these new transitions we just made, I'm going to go ahead and paste that in place. And make sure to get the animations for the right hand side too. So at this point we should have transition rules filled out for all 6 of the aim animations from left and from right, going down to their relative transition animation. Now, what we're going to do is create a transition from each one of these new aim to rifle walk transitions. We're going to drag it down to our rifle walk. And what we're going to do here is something a little bit different with the transition. So from aim left to rifle walk, I'm going to open up that transition. And we're going to right click and we're going to search for our ratio and time remaining. And we're going to check to see if it is less than. And for this one, we are going to use an unusually high value. I'm going to put in 0.9. Essentially, we don't really want this animation to play. We just want our animation to call that anim notify. And by putting it at 0.9, it's going to basically, when you see it in action, it's not even really going to play the animation visibly. So we're going to go back and we're going to put in the same transition rule from aim right to rifle walk. So we'll search for ratio, get our time remaining, and we're going to check to see that it is less than. And we're going to put in a value of 0.9 and connect it to our result. So at this point, we have an animation that's sitting in there, and on the very first key, it is triggering our anim notify to toggle whether or not we're taking cover. So let's go ahead and compile and save, and we'll test it out. So if I have my character here, and we take cover, I'm going to go ahead and hit the button to aim, and I hit the back button, he steps out of cover. So if I move up to cover again, and enter cover. Let's try it from the left side this time. I'm going to go ahead and aim, and I'm going to back out of cover, and he makes a pretty smooth transition out of cover here. So now we have the ability to get into cover, move left and right, aim in cover while moving left and right, and then walk out of cover while we're aiming, as well as moving out of cover when we are not aiming. So that's going to complete the video for today. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below, and thanks for watching.